Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Diane Cullen, and I'm joined by Wendy Stevens. We are both with MacroPro. And I don't think I've said in a little while, but MacroPro is a document retrieval company, and we are defense only. So if you ever need to get records of any type, we will be here for you. Hey, Wendy, how are you doing as far as your holiday plans and wrapping and all that other stuff?
You know, Diane, I have to tell you that I am getting there. I'm not completely ready for the holidays yet. I still have some packages to wrap. But we talked earlier about, are we people who put gifts in a bag, or if we're people who wrap the gifts and embellish the outsides of them. In the question box, if you'll just put a little comment, if you're somebody who wraps your gifts or if you put them in bags. I personally am a wrapper. I like to wrap anything. It could be in a box and I'll put some pretty paper on it, and then I just embellish the heck out of it with bows and some really fun ornaments. And it could be birthday, Christmas, but it's Christmas, so I'm in like hog heaven with my bow making, which I love to do. How about you, Diane? Are you a bag lady or are you a bow lady?
I'm with Cindy here. I see in the comments, she says she's a bag lady. And I too am a bag lady. Karen says she's a wrapper. Sandra says she does both. One person, Patricia says that she loves both to wrap and the bags, which is great. Stacy, she does both depending on the gift, and I think you guys who wrap can make things look so beautiful. And I'm always happy when I get a wrap present, and I'm kind of sad when I hand them my little bag because it's not as delightful as what you guys can do. So here, Jessica says she mostly wraps. So it's kind of fun to do that. So let's get on with our program. We got Dalene Bartholomew who's going to be our speaker. She's always excellent. So I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and I'm going to turn it over to Wendy. So just as a reminder, this is part of our 12 CEUs of the holiday series, and we are happy to be doing these for you. Today's webinar is worth 1 California CEU. If you have a problem downloading your certificate, please let me know. I need to know within the first 30 days, otherwise I can't help you out. You must be logged on to GoToWebinar, which meant you used the link that was sent for you specifically. If you borrowed somebody else's link, they forwarded it to you, their name would be on the certificate, and there's no way for us to change that for you. Dalene has some really great handouts, so you want to download those right now so that you can have it and keep it. And then if you have any questions, Wendy and I are going to be monitoring that. So just where you told us if you're bag people or wrapping people, put your questions there and we'll be happy to ask that of Dalene. And then lastly, you'll be able to see this on the MacroPro YouTube channel in the future, probably this afternoon if you'd like. All right, Wendy, I'm going to turn this over to you now.
Great. Thanks, Diane. Dalene Bartholomew is going to pop on the screen here. Dalene, are you with us?
I am
There
here.
we go.
I'm pleased
Hi,
to be
Dalene.
here.
Dalene is with Data Group, and she is an expert in workers' compensation. She's been in the investigative space for well over 25 years, and she actually was Investigator of the Year one time. We were talking about a conference she had attended, and lo and behold, out of 1,000 attendees, she was named Investigator of the Year, and she was probably one of 20 women that were there. So kudos to you, Dalene. She has a woman-owned business, and she works really well in fraud prevention and has some really good investigative strategies. So Dalene, I am going to let you take it away, and we'll hop in if we have any questions for you, okay?
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Diane. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're going to have a really great time talking about the California fraud landscape. So I'm excited to be part of the MacroPro and Friends webinar series. And we are going to have a great time today. We're going to be exploding with solutions. So you'll see that Data Group, we're kind of all about new ideas. So our light bulb theme is definitely part of who we are. We provide modern and new technological solutions to investigations and fraud abatement with a strong focus on fraud prevention. So we're going to talk today about fraud in California. We're going to start with what are the current scams that are happening right now. Then we're going to see what's next. So we're sort of looking into my crystal ball to kind of see what I predict for the future. And then we're going to talk about strategies that you can use right now in your program to help with fraud. And then we're going to look at fraud from a claimant perspective and a provider fraud perspective. So let's just start with a quick overview of fraud. California Department of Insurance estimates that 36% of insurance claims have an element of fraud or abuse. So that's a pretty significant amount. So for all of us who've been in this industry for a while, we all know we've seen fraud and abuse. So today we're going to take a look at that. You know, as a fraud expert, I've been involved in hundreds of convictions for insurance fraud. And what we know about statistics is 95% of the time a claimant is committing insurance fraud, they have no criminal record. So these are not professional criminals. These are people that kind of maybe take advantage of a situation, but it's not usually not well thought out, not usually a whole fraud strategy around it. However, provider fraud is the opposite. These are hardcore sort of criminals that tend to have a very elaborate plan, a scheme that's all put together. And so through kind of oftentimes an organized criminal enterprise. So we're going to look at both sides of this coin today, kind of the claimant fraud and the provider fraud. So let's get started by first of all saying, you know, we talked about a lot of claims that are fraud and abuse, but there's a lot of claims that are completely legitimate. So statistically, you know, 2/3, if you will, of the claims are completely legitimate. And for those, you know, we're all in this industry too, because we like to help people and we want people that get hurt at work to get the benefits they need. And so for us, you know, when we can identify fraud early, that also paves the way for identifying claims that are legitimate early as well. So people can get those benefits that they need. Because when we're at work, things go wrong. And people get hurt when things go wrong. And so we all know that. We're all in this industry. We all see sometimes that, you know, accidents happen. And when that does, you know, we want to help people. We want them to get better as quickly as they possibly can. So this poor guy is having a bad day at work. Pretty rough going there, for sure. So poor guy, rough day, things go wrong. So, and those are the kind of cases that we want to investigate and, you know, have a good solution for, to bring those awareness so that the people can get the benefits they're entitled to as quickly as possible. So then the other side of this is the fraud problem. So we've got some current scams that have actually been in the news recently. So many of you guys might have even seen this. This kind of went viral. It was on a lot of social media. We're going to look at it though, and look at it from kind of a different perspective. So I don't know if you guys have seen Operation Bear Claw. So for those of you who haven't seen this, what happened was 4 people, Los Angeles area, got together and decided that they were going to create a situation that they would be able to file an auto claim for damage to some cars. So there's 3 cars involved in this scam. And the 3 cars are insured by 3 different insurance companies. And so they pulled the same scam on all 3 cars and submitted 3 separate claims. And the claims involved damage done to the interiors of the car by a bear. So they claimed the bear got into the car, created some damage, and they filed the claim. And so they had video of the bear in the car. And so it's not playing very well. There we go. So they had this video of this bear in the car and gets in there. The interesting thing about the bear is it's not a bear, it's a person in a bear costume. And they filed 3 insurance claims with 3 different carriers, and 2 of the 3 carriers paid the claim. And these were substantial claims. They amounted to over $141,000. And so one of the adjusters took a look at this thing and said, I don't think this looks like a bear, and sent it over to SIU. So I just love when adjusters trust their instincts and say something's not right. So these are photos of, I think, is that a wine bottle there behind that car seat? I don't really know. These are alleged bear damage done to this inside of these cars. And so this adjuster who said, I don't think this is a bear, it did go in for further investigation. They actually hired an expert to look at the video and determined that it is definitely not a bear, that it was a person inside of a bear costume. So you'll see it's a different car, but it's the same story. It's the same person going into the car, doing the same kind of damage, just a different car. So this is the Mercedes. And so interestingly enough, the bear could open the door car. Very smart bear. So this actually goes along and it shows this 3 times, these 3 different cars, all the damage they submitted in these claims. It's pretty amusing. And so they did an investigation and they found the bear costume. So these guys, $141,000 were paid, and this case went to law enforcement. And they have been arrested and charged with insurance fraud. And there's so many funny things about this to me. So the most interesting part is, so these 4 guys got together, and where were they sort of sitting around like, well, gosh, we need some money. You know, I know, let's commit insurance fraud. Oh, I have an idea. So how about, Ruben, you dress as a bear and we'll set up these cameras, and we can, I mean, this is just the funniest thing that they came up with this, and not one of the 4 ever said, you know, I don't think this is such a great idea. So they went through with it. It's pretty funny, especially when you look at this costume. There hasn't been a, you know, this colored bear in California for quite a number of years. So anyway, this is sort of the scam, but point for us, I think, is that adjusters, you guys know your claims, and if you've been doing this for a while, you create great instincts, really great instincts. So trust your gut. If you feel like something's not right, absolutely investigate it. If you haven't, you know, call your SIU partner, call your investigator, talk about that, because your instincts are good. And so these are the kinds of things that I think savvy adjusters really pick up on and catch these kinds of crooks, because this is just crazy. Here's another one that was recently in the news. And if you guys saw this is actually more common than you might think. It is actually, in the industry, we call it a swoop and Scott. It just means when someone gets in front of you, slams on the brakes so that you rear end them. This car stopped in time, so the car rear-ended, backed into them. So if you have an employee who says, I was in a car accident, you know, while in the course of my job, but they stopped dead in front of me. They caused the accident, even though I rear-ended them. That very well could be the case. This actually happens all the time. Then these guys get out and do a whole show, basically put on a show about like, oh my gosh, you hit us, when in fact they backed into that driver. And so this was in LA. So this is common. Unfortunately, we see it more and more all the time. It's just very dangerous. I mean, people really could get hurt. This is a busy road. You're dealing with, you know, colliding cars, but people just do the craziest stuff for fraud. So that's kind of a glimpse of what we see sometimes. Certainly, you know, I've been in the industry a long time, and I have seen applicant attorney fraud for a very long time. So what you're seeing here is advertisements of an attorney in Los Angeles that uses to target specific employers to try to cap their employees, try to get their employees to file claims, and they lure them in by saying, I give you a cash advance. I will give you access to medical care. I will pay off all your bills. I'm gonna, you know, I'll give you a ride to everything, to all your appointments. You know, we can, and then they start to say, when they get clients, they could say, well, if you bring me your coworkers, I'll even give you some more cash. I'll give you a bonus. So these are some of the scams that we see. that are happening right now in California. These are very prevalent. Unfortunately, our industry is kind of very hard to tackle some of this stuff, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the provider fraud scams that we see most often, what you just saw there was capping. It's called capping or steering. That's where they try to get other people to bring them cases, bring attorneys new clients. Certainly we see billing for services not rendered. Copy service fraud. This does not include MacroPro. MacroPro's defense only. These are these applicant copy services that can just be terrible. Adding services that aren't medically necessary. All kinds of different stuff here that we see on the provider fraud side in California. This bottom one, though, voucher fraud, also has been in the news recently. It's kind of exciting for us fraud people, as fraud geeks, when fraud gets in the news a lot, because it kind of brings up conversation. It enables us to really bring that forward, to have these kinds of conversations around this crazy stuff that people do, that people actually do sit around and say, hey, why don't we go get a bear costume and destroy some cars? Or why don't we actually pull in front of a car and slam on the brakes and try to get them to rear-end us? These are things that actually happen all the time. But when it comes into the news, it brings that up for people and it puts us into this awareness. So we just love when this stuff starts to get news, because it happens all the time, but when it actually gets some exposure, it really helps our industry, brings that to the forefront. And so recently, voucher fraud has been also in the news because it's kind of an interesting story. So vouchers, as we all know on this call, supplemental job displacement benefits. So you get a voucher, and it's for retraining for qualified injured workers, for them to go learn something else, to have a marketable skill, re-enter that workforce. It's great. It's helps people, and that's again part of why we were drawn into this industry. And so this is a benefit. That's great, but it also can be, unfortunately, abused regularly. And in California, we see this a lot. But recently, they're getting some publicity because the school is owned by a woman by the name of Hazel Ortega. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's kind of a fascinating story. So Hazel actually wrote a book called From Bounced Checks to Private Jets, which is sort of funny if you kind of think of where the story's going here. So she wrote this book after she had started her school to help rehab people that have been injured on the job. And so she was very proud of her success and sort of touted herself as this sort of self-made woman who really, pulled herself up by the bootstraps. So not only did she write this book, but then she sort of held herself out as a speaker, kind of a real advocate. She went out into the industry. She started really getting, known, and doing a lot of publicity around her success with this business and all the people she helped. She grew her rehab school to be the largest in California, which would have been great if she hadn't been committing fraud. So this is her website, promotes herself, really has, over 47,000 injured workers served, was really pushing out again. This would have all been great had it been a legitimate and legal operation, but that wasn't what was happening. She has been arrested. She's been charged with 23 counts of provider fraud. This is in Los Angeles, and it's for insurance fraud, theft, and forgery. She had all kinds of different scams going on here, but she was providing illegal kickbacks to refer students to her. She was misusing the displacement vouchers. She was giving courses that were absolutely not approved at all, and she was billing for services not rendered. And as the district attorney started investigating this case, they were reaching out to some of the students who were registered, and some of those students or claimants that had said they'd never even heard of that school. And these were already invoices that had gone to adjusters for payment for services that were never rendered. So our author and public speaker and you know, was committing all this fraud. And so now she's getting more publicity than I think she even tried to get on herself in the beginning, which was now that she's facing major fraud charges. So again, you know, these are the things that we've always seen in California for a long time, just getting a lot of publicity right now, kind of interesting. And in some ways, like I said, very beneficial for the fraud side, because it helps us talk about it, brings it to light, first brings it into the awareness, really helps us sort of say, you know, there's a lot of challenges here. So we definitely have some, you know, the provider fraud piece, we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that. And then claimant fraud, what we see that we struggle with on this side is that we're seeing these sorts of defenses. Some of them we've seen for a long time. If you're an adjuster and you've been around for a while, you've heard these, right? We get maybe some surveillance film. They're like, I was having a good day that day, or I was on my pain medicine that day. Or maybe we're saying, oh, you know, you weren't honest in this deposition. You weren't honest in this statement. Oh, I didn't understand that question, or English isn't my first language, or I made a mistake, made a mistake of fact. So on the claimant side, you know, we see a lot of fraud, and we present that to district attorneys in California for prosecution. And the great thing about California is the district attorneys are grant funded, so there's actually funding for them specifically to prosecute workers' comp fraud, and that includes claimant fraud, provider fraud, and premium fraud, so all three kinds of fraud. But we do sort of still struggle with these cases. And so when we build a case, we want to make sure that we're cognizant of these kinds of barriers that we see and how we're going to overcome them. So we'll talk about that when we get to the solutions side of our presentation. How do we overcome these kinds of challenges when we know that this, you know, abuse and fraud is prevalent? So we at Data Group kind of like to come in with a balanced approach. For us, it's much easier to prevent the fraud than it is to prosecute the fraud. So we know it's there. So we like to sort of identify it as early as we can, have a system in place to note when things aren't right, collaborate with our clients early on. Early intervention is definitely the key, and stop the fraud before it can happen. Because then when we get to the prosecution side, we definitely face some challenges. So we're going to talk next about, so we've talked about a lot of stuff in California. We have a lot of crazy stuff going on here in California, because we're number one in fraud. I mean, come on, it's California, we're number one. So we have a lot, and it changes and it evolves. We've got some things that are kind of the theme. We've got some new scams coming. But this is definitely the landscape that we see. It's in all kinds, everything from claimant, just one injured worker, all the way to these providers that are running rings, that are very organized, that are very planned out. All different kinds of fraud is always coming at us. So before we go to the next section, where we're going to kind of talk about what's next, are there any questions? So I'd love to hear from anybody out there. If anyone has a question or a thought or anything they want to cover. Have you guys seen some of these things? This is where we have had a lot of media exposure lately. Have you guys seen these scams? All this stuff been on social media. I think that local news has covered some of this stuff, because it's been all in our state. It's all kinds of crazy. No? Okay, fair enough. Okay, so Wendy.
Well, Dalene, I actually didn't have a question, but years ago, I did investigations for an insurance carrier. And when a bear breaks into a vehicle, I promise you, it smells more than any, like you cannot even handle the smell. When a bear uses its strength, it pulls the window frame, shatters everything. And when they get into a vehicle, they don't do those really nice, smooth technique of scraping. They just rip and shred. So
yeah. They had some flaws in their plan, for sure. For sure they did. Yeah, absolutely.
But just a comment.
No, I love it. I still can't get over that. Out of 4 people like I can kind of see, like maybe you're going out, maybe you're having some drinks with your friends. You're like, oh, I have a great idea, and you're drinking it, so you think it's a good idea, and then the next day when you're sober, you realize that's not a good idea at all. And then 4 people get together and they're like, no, this is a totally good idea. We're totally gonna do this bear thing. It's like,
You would think that they may have Googled what does it look like when a bear breaks into a vehicle.
your car. I know. Like you're right, because it would look completely different. And the fact that they use some sort of like this kitchen tool that's used to sort of shred meat, and that it was just all in one of their homes when the investigators came with a search warrant is just too funny. It's just so funny. So anyway, the bear situation is pretty unique, but has been good for the humor side of it because it's just such a bad idea.
Well, we have just a couple more comments. Alma indicated that she's seen the bear fraud on the news, which that definitely is
That's
something
good.
that we've seen. And
Yeah,
then there was a question Bianca has asked, indicated that she saw the fraud, but that they had to deny payment to an attorney's office recently. And then other folks have commented that there was really no vehicle left after the bear broke into the vehicle.
It was, yes, it would have been substantially more damage. So to your point, like they had this, they didn't do a lot of work to find that bear costume and get all of that coordinated and get the camera set up just right, but they didn't just do that extra layer of, like you said, just Google some images of a car that's actually been, had a bear break into it. So, because they are pretty smart. I mean, they'll get in there if there's any food left in that car. They know they'll figure out how to open those doors. They'll get in there, but you're right, Wendy, it's totally trash. It doesn't look anything like.
Yeah, as somebody who's actually had to crawl into those vehicles with a bear, the smell is something you've never smelled before, and you probably never want to smell it again.
You never want to smell it again. So funny. Well,
so that's all the questions we have right now, Dalene.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Well, that was good. I'm glad. And again, I'm glad some people have seen it because it does tell me that, the news does carry these kinds of stories, which is exactly what we want in this industry. We really want that sort of publicity. So that's perfect. Okay. So in our next section, I want to talk about kind of what's new in insurance fraud, kind of what we're going to see moving forward. So this is just kind of, based on kind of just some insights, little predictions. I always like to try to kind of see if I can figure out, what might be coming around the pipe. So what we definitely, I think one of the things that we can kind of bank on is that we're going to see more cyber insurance fraud, right? We know this is escalating. It's been emerging for a while, but we're really seeing this tick up. And what we've been really seeing now that's sort of scaring us is that sort of the synthetics. And so this is where organized crime has really been putting a lot of their time over the last, 10, 20 years even, is sort of building fake identities. And so it goes way beyond just kind of creating a fake identity that you might think of when we kind of like when someone's identity is compromised and they might try to steal someone's identity. This is like a whole fake person that they have created over time, and they have a lot of people they've created that have even not only identities, but they have bank accounts and they have job histories and they have credit histories, credit scores. There's all kinds of information that ties to this this fake person that makes them seem very real. Large companies are actually finding that these people can even get into their be hired, and they're not real people, and now they're getting payroll and vendors. It's just a huge problem, and it goes all the way to the end of a life cycle, and we're seeing them in life insurance. That life insurance is paying for deaths of people that never even existed. So this is very high tech. This is sort of really super organized international crime, but it is absolutely in our industry. In our country, it's prevalent, and it's very expensive, and it's very hard to detect now. So we're seeing this grow, and so I definitely predict this will continue to be on the upswing. So this is that's kind of funny. This is a really high tech crime, and then you've got the bear costume that's a little, you've got really the two like polar opposite things to talk about that just seem crazy. But certainly cyber insurance, the use of AI, and you've got bots that are just buying insurance policies. It's really going to be tough for our industry to stay on top of this stuff. Unfortunately, this is coming at us fast, and there's a lot of really people that are way smarter than me working on, coming up with great solutions for this. And so, I think we will, just like every kind of new fraud that comes down the pipe, we'd have to come up with ways to identify it quickly, combat it, try to prevent it, and when crimes occur, try to prosecute it. So I think we're just in that cycle right now where this is just new, and everyone's kind of trying to step in and figure out what the heck's going on. But I read a statistic last week that said something like, I think $45 million has been paid in life insurance to people they've now figured out never even lived. So the numbers are just starting to really kind of come in, through the door, and just really some statistics around that stuff. So unfortunately, stay tuned. There's going to definitely be some more of this coming at us for sure. And my other big prediction is dental fraud. And so where we're really seeing this now is not any kind of trauma directly to the face or the teeth, but rather someone who's had another kind of injury, other kind of trauma that they claim is now causing them pain, that there might be, biting or grinding, or it's been causing them stress because of the claim and whatever else issues. And now the stress is causing them to bite down or grind their teeth, and that's causing the dental problem. So what you're seeing is sort of an add-on, and the applicant's attorneys, and of course they've partnered with dental trauma centers, and they're steering people to go there and get a ridiculously expensive mouth guard. And so we're seeing mouth guards that are costing $15,000 for a mouth guard that's like a $2 mouth guard. So this is coming in the door now, and so my guess is we'll continue to see this escalate as it sort of catches on. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this already on your claims, if you've already sort of seen this crazy stuff come through, but we are seeing a huge uptick in this, and we anticipate this to be a huge problem, like, the compound cream kind of level problem. So, as we see these new scams come in, we can kind of try to see, yep, this is going to catch on. It's hard to kind of manage. We're even seeing with this that the dentists are actually saying, oh, just hold your camera in your mouth and take some pictures. You don't have to come into my office. I'm just going to get some photos virtually, and then I'll mail you that mouth guard, and then they bill the $10,000 to $15,000 to the work comp adjuster. So keep an eye out. Again, call your resources when you see this stuff. Don't give into it, because you might just be like, it's a one-off. Like, no, it's just the first one. So they're coming in. So yeah, let me know if you've seen that, because these are my thoughts for the stuff we're really going to have to be dealing with in the coming year for sure. Okay, so we'll move on, unless anyone has a question on sort of what's next, future stuff. We will move on to the final segment, which is going to be strategies. So how do we deal with all of the shenanigans, right? How we got all the stuff coming at us, and it's like whack-a-mole. You got to, just keep swinging. So we'll start with claimant fraud, and then we'll go to provider fraud and look at strategies for both of these. So we got our light bulb up, all about ideas, all about new stuff, all about kind of how we use things, even how we use our tools, how we identify stuff. So, okay, some claimant fraud strategies. So we're going to talk about investigative tools and how we leverage those in claimant fraud. But we're going to start with social media, because I just think it's one of the best ones. And because every day, right, billions of images are uploaded. So many hours of video are uploaded. So there's so much of it. Oh, Wendy, you have a question?
I'm sorry,
Um,
I should
I
have
love it.
jumped in, but apparently the weather in Santa Rosa is keeping my internet from allowing me to jump on soon enough.
Having weather.
So there's comments that we've definitely seen stress-induced TMJ.
Yeah.
And also, let's see, applicants' first notice and CT claims continue to come in more and more. Are there any tips to help the ER or the adjusters combat or get the DAs involved?
Yes. And we will absolutely get to that because I think that's a perfect question because there are some tips for that. Because you know, right? Gosh, it's one of the craziest things about California is we have those CT claims and they are so brutal. They're so challenging. So we'll definitely take a look at those because they are crazy.
Fantastic.
But you know, it's good to know that so okay. So we're seeing some dental stuff. I mean, you're right, but I think the partnership between the dental trauma centers and the applicant attorneys is just really got put into sort of like turbocharged. So I think we're just going to see a ton of it. Good questions. I love it. Social media is always one of the great tools, and you know, it just gives us insight into not only what a claimant is doing, or what they post, but what, you know, their roommate, their teenage child might post, their spouse might post. I mean, there's just so much information. We can really learn a lot about what they're doing currently, what they were maybe doing around the time of that injury. You know, it's just so useful. And we see it all the time. People post their own, you know, activities, and we have to dig around to find their, you know, their different aliases, the different, you know, ways that they post things. Might be under a different name, but we can find that information often. And when we do these kinds of searches, I mean, we find, you know, at least almost half the time we find all kinds of information, social media footprints, active social medias. We find 14% of the time we find other employment information. 21% of the time we find activities of sports or travel. And 6% of the time we find posts that are right around that date of injury that are applicable. So it's a very inexpensive tool. It's great to really have insight, but I really like to do this early in the claim because I really think it's such a great fraud prevention tool, because if something's not quite right, we can see it early. We can address it with a provider early. We can address it with the claimant early if they're not repped, and we can just really get involved. And so I think it's just a fantastic tool that continues to evolve, because what's online is just sort of always changing how people post things, how we find things where, you know, we can just see a lot of different information. So it's a great tool, big fan of this. And, you know, good social media needs to be connected with a good background, because that's how we really bring the whole picture together. We can really see, you know, where people have lived, where they've lived in the past, who they live with, you know, do they have any other aliases? So that really enables a full and complete search. A lot of times we see employment data. They might have a business license or professional license that they're using. Sometimes we see financial data. This is super important, especially when there is a stress component. We can find civil records where they injured somewhere else in some sort of other incident, criminal records. You know, was there a recent criminal matter where they injured in the course of some sort of crime? And all, you know, just so many searches, so much data that we can sort of take a look at and really get that big picture. And again, I'm a big fan of this early on. We want to start early intervention in fraud prevention. And then Medical Canvas, another great tool. And then you can get these records over to, you can get the list over to MacroPro, and they can go get these records for you. So identifying where somebody has treated is that first step in really getting that medical history, getting those prior treatments, getting where they have had prescriptions filled. So we see 81% of the canvases we do, we get back hits of facilities that have records, and we average 3 facilities per canvas. And then we get this, provide a chronology outline that kind of shows when the injury happened and when these medical records, when these facilities have records. So you can decide what records you want MacroPro to go get for you. And so you can use a subpoena, you can use a medical release, but again, now we've got information. And the thing that I really like about doing this stuff early is now we can take all of that in, know everything before we start to really act on taking statements or going to depot. We can really develop a strategy that again, it's that early intervention approach. It's preventing fraud, preventing abuse, because we can see things that don't quite look right and we can address them. So if we're thinking about fraud, we kind of have these two avenues, right? We want to help the claim, and then we want to look at it from a fraud standpoint. And it used to be sort of, I would advocate for build that fraud case, get the lie. But I'll be honest, I've really seen better outcomes for our clients by, instead of trying to get the lie, prevent the fraud. Ask the questions and get the truth. Don't get a lie. Go for fraud prevention. And so to do that, we need all this information to get in there early, and it has the biggest impact. So, because as investigators, or even your defense attorneys who are going to go do a depot, knowledge is having the right answer, but intelligence is asking the right question. And we can't ask the right questions if we don't have all the information. So doing those early investigations, do those with the background, that social media, those medical canvas, dig into that claim, get those statements. We want to get all that information so that when we have that conversation with that unrepresented claimant, or we go to that deposition, we know the questions to ask. We have all the answers. And so when someone's not being truthful, so if we're saying, do you have any other outside income besides your job? Are you working anywhere else besides your subject job? And they say no. Instead of just letting it lie there, we could say, well, I see you got a business license 6 months ago. Can you tell me more about that? Ask the question. So don't just let it sit, but dig in. And that is where we have the opportunity to prevent fraud, to really bring it out, to really help make an impact on these cases, is by continuing to sort of dig in. If we say, hey, can you tell us what was happening around the date of injury? Oh, nothing. Well, your daughter posted that you had all gone to Disneyland. Can you tell me about that? So ask those questions and really sort of build that strong strategy around your claim, the things that you're seeing, and as again, as adjusters, when things don't look right, you kind of get that feeling, or you're getting tips, maybe, colleagues, or maybe your client is saying, here's some tips we have. Let's act on that. Let's go get that information. And let's ask all those pointed questions in that recorded statement or in that deposition. And let's really build the case to prevent that abuse and fraud, to put that case back on track. And that's also going to help you settle cases earlier when employees know that you're looking into things and they're going to be asked these tough questions. It really kind of helps move things along. So I'm a big advocate for that early intervention and gathering all the information and really asking those candid, direct statements. We're not being aggressive. We're not it's not an interrogation, but it is a question where we're curious, right? We're going to ask the follow-up question in a curious way. I think that's just really critical. And then, of course, when we need to do surveillance, these are the times where, we have reason to believe something's going on. There's some activity that they're doing beyond the restrictions or what the doctor thinks they could, or that maybe could show they could get back, into a modified position, or some goal that you can say, oh my gosh, if we get film of them doing something beyond the restrictions or doing something that we think that they're doing, we have a plan to show that to a doctor, to take that over here and get this better result, get this outcome, get them back to work, reduce that PD. So it's all about the strategy and how we use that. As we go out to surveillance, surveillance is a more expensive tool, and you don't get to use that on every case. So you want to pick the right ones, and then we want to definitely have a plan. But we also, when we think about surveillance, we also think about getting it legally, ethically, right? We want to make sure we can use it, that we can show it to the doctor, that we can show it at the board, and that if we're going to pursue a fraud case, that we can use it in criminal court. So to do that, we have to think of, kind of shift our mind. We're not sort of fraud finders, fact finders. Like, we're just neutral, gathering information. What are we seeing out there? And so we don't create activity. We don't do anything like entrapment. We don't trespass. We don't put our camera up to a hole in the fence and do things like that. We just observe and record. But we do it strategically, right? So we have all this other information. We have the social media. We know things about them. We've taken statements. We've gathered as much information as we can. So we're going out with a clear plan of action. We know when their medical appointments are. We know, what's happening in their life if they're posting anything. We have kind of a sense of things. And so we go out and we get good film, and then we have a plan for how to use that film. And that's where we really see the biggest impact when people are trying to abuse the system. When we've got malingerers, we get some information, get them back to work. We've got people who are exaggerating, we get that PD put right down where it should be. So lots of good information. We have, we want, as investigators, it's important for us to always be mindful of getting things legally and not jeopardizing our clients, not jeopardizing their brand. It's such an important component. So all investigations need to be done that way. And so having that information up front gives you that edge so that you're confident when you go out. This is what our plan is. This is what we're going to do, gather film. And this is what we're going to do if we get some film, so that everyone's really clear. So then we're moving quickly, because we don't want to keep paying people unnecessarily. So we want people to get the benefits they're entitled to, but not more than. Okay, now let's talk about something kind of more fun. Some more, some technology tools. So one of the things that happens when we drive around is our license plates get recorded in various places. When we cross bridges, when we have certain parking lots, certain areas, certain intersections, our license plates get recorded and they get sold. And so we can, as investigators, we can purchase a license plate reader, which is sort of a run of where a certain license plate was seen. So this can be helpful sometimes in some surveillance situations where we're not sure, maybe we're not sure what residence they live in, we're not even maybe sure what city they're hanging out in all the time. Maybe they have a residence, or maybe they're staying with a girlfriend, maybe they're moving, maybe we don't know. So we can gather information through various sources, and a license plate reader is one of them, one of the sources. The other thing that's kind of fun is facial recognition software. And if you've never played with this, it's kind of a cool thing. What you're looking at is 6 pictures of me, but I just dropped my photo, not my name, nothing else, just my one photo, into a website called PIMEYES, P-I-M-E-Y-E-S. You can go into PIMEYES.com, and you can drag your photo in there and see if it finds you online. So it found me, and this is free. So what you're seeing, you can get this for free, but these photos all link up to something, some news article or some website or some post or something. And for $15, you can buy that. You can buy the link to connect you to all these different things. So it's just another tool that we have and that we're sharing with you today, because it's kind of fun. So when you're done with our presentation, go check it out if you've never played with it before. And again, just another tool in the toolbox. So investigators, we have a lot of resources and we have a lot of tools. And oh my gosh, over at Data Group, we love technology. We love it. We love AI. We love all of it. So we definitely like to take each case, really look at it, really break it down, strategize, use the tools that are appropriate for that one. And so by the time we head out the door for investigations, we are ready. We have a good plan of action. We know what we're looking for. We know what questions to ask. We know what rocks to overturn. So I think that it's kind of the fun part of investigations, sort of looking at it from 360 degrees and sort of figuring out what do we want to do here. But the sooner we get those cases, the better. As soon as there's some sort of a sliver of information that something's not right, there's a tip, there's anything that we can really just sort of do the appropriate investigation for that level where the claim is and really help out in these claimant situations, especially. So there's a lot we can do, and a lot of information can come in very fast, and then we can really strategize that. And that's true for unrepresented claimants all the way to represented, to these sort of attorneys who are filing these crazy CT claims and doing all this stuff. It's kind of the same process. Every claim just needs to be looked at, needs to be dissected, and kind of said, okay, what is this? We know this applicant attorney, and we know the group of doctors that they use. We know the stages they're going to go through. So how do we disrupt that? So these kinds of early investigations are one way, and then we're going to get into the provider fraud stuff here next. But before I get into that too much, we'll pause here before we jump into the provider fraud strategies. Are there any questions on the claimant side? Some of the strategies we talked about, some of the tools, kind of how to approach, fraud prevention, but certainly if a crime's been committed, we want to get that over to law enforcement and get them prosecuted. Oh, Diane, I think you're on mute. But we want to hear you. There you go.
We did have a question here. And so someone is asking, how do we deal with someone that is being investigated, but all of their social media is private?
Yes. So we definitely didn't want to do an investigation that sort of looks at their circle of influence, right? We want to see, okay, who have they lived with in the past? Who are they living with now? Who are their relatives? Let's get onto their social media and let's see if they're not posting things about the family, the group, their group of friends, and see if we can't find that person that way. Also, though, we do want to search the internet. Like, we're not just searching social media, which people can shut down and privatize their social media. We're also going to look to see, are they just on a bowling team, or are they on a part of a group or an association, or are they volunteering somewhere? Like, some of that stuff just gets posted and it's not social media and they can't block it. It's just out there. So we're going to look at it from a bunch of different ways, and we definitely want to dig in and be creative when the first go we don't see anything. Because it's pretty, most of us, it's pretty likely that we have no online presence. That's rare. There's something usually out there. Might not be overly helpful to the claim, but we at least want to see what we get sure we collect all that there is. And so some of the times you do have to kind of get a little creative. Part of the other thing that a background does is it not only provides, any kind of other aliases or maiden names, but we also get a list of, like, oftentimes different phone numbers they've used, different emails that they have connected to their identity, and we start plugging those into. So you're not just searching a name, you're searching like all these different data points, and that really brings in a lot of information. So good question. Learning some of the tricks that we use over here. So provider fraud, let's talk about what we do with these providers. So we all know that they're out there. Southern California is just a hotbed, but frankly, all of California's got its problems. So when we see these cases come in, and we sort of have talked about the different kinds that there are, it can be doctors, it can be, whole big schemes, post-term CT, there's all different kinds of stuff that's coming in the door. So we all kind of know you get this kind of, these bad claims, you can settle them. You can just settle them. You can try to sell them for nuisance value, get them off your plate. We all agree, only good claim's a closed claim. So that's one way. That moves that claim along and gets it off the books, which is great. But the downside is you've just taught an applicant attorney, you'll settle. So they're going to come back, right? That's the problem, is now there's a cycle. So it might not be the best strategy. So you maybe want to defend it. So that's really going to need to investigate it, get your defense attorney in on it, you're going to set some depots, like you're going to fight. And so this is going to cost more on the front end, because now you're going to sort of bring your team together and you're, okay, let's fight this. This is fraud. We know it's fraud. We know this applicant attorney's bad. This doctor's not even seeing this person, these boilerplate reports, the whole thing. We know it's bad. So we decide to defend it. If you're going to do that and you're seeing a pattern, I recommend consolidating them at the board that you're at. Go in with a notice of consolidation, try to get all the cases in front of one judge at the board. So that judge can see you're not just fighting one case, you're fighting this, 12, 20, 40 cases, whatever it is happening for you. that they can see this as a pattern. And that's very helpful when you have the same sort of pattern, because a lot of times these scams, they go after one employer and they just get employees to bring in other employees, and all of a sudden you've got all these, you know, applicant attorneys, same doctor, same thing, same pattern. So if you're going to fight them, I recommend doing a notice of consolidation and getting in front of one judge so that they can really show. And it also shows that attorney, that doctor you're going to fight. So they want the easy win, right? They just want to go and make the money really fast. So this is a great strategy too, to kind of push back, because you'll have to do it for a while, but eventually they will move on to someone else. So another road is to go after them civilly. It's called a qui tam, and it sort of means that you're going to build a case and you're going to go to civil court and show that this provider or this group of providers has caused you damage and that it was through fraud, but you're not pursuing it criminally. This is more civilly. And pros and cons to this is long. It's, you know, you got to go to court, you got to build your evidence. It's expensive. You need to do a lot of depots. Your defense attorneys fees are going to be high, but it does scare the heck out of providers. And, you know, you got to get a judgment and go after it, but it is effective. And it does make a stand as far as saying, you know, not in my program. You're not coming to my program with your fraud. So it's just one more tool in the toolbox of options. And then there's criminal prosecution. You can add criminal prosecution to all of the above because it's its own road. So you can still take your case and hand it over to your SIU and they can go talk with the district attorney. The district attorney might already have a whole bunch of cases involving this very same thing. They might already have a criminal investigation open. So it never hurts to go and also just have that conversation with the district attorney in the county where this stuff's happening, with the Department of Insurance Fraud Task Force who handles these kinds of things. Never hurts to get your SIU involved and just see what's happening and put that into the pipeline. But I don't recommend just putting all your eggs in that basket. Also pick one of these other options so that you have a strategy for how to deal with these that are coming in the door for you. So you got the claim side, and you got your fraud side for sure. So there's other options. Always talk with your team about your specific thing. Pull in your SIU, pull in your defense attorneys, pull in your risk managers, you know, bring in the think tank, you know, talk about this stuff. There's no just one way. Just the best thing to do though is always do something, come up with some strategy and fight it on some level because it's California, it's going to keep coming at us. Unfortunately. So there's no right way to tackle it every time. We just got to kind of keep at it. But the best thing to do is also consult with your SIU and make sure they're staying up on what's new and what's happening so that they're giving you updated advice and helping you in this craziness that we have to deal with here in California to continue to fight fraud. So I did put a little handout that just got some information, some red flags to talk and my contact information. And I welcome anyone to call me anytime if they ever need anything or have any questions, or if we can ever help you on your program. We would be more than happy to do that. And hi, Dan, any other questions or any other comments?
I did not see any other questions, but I would like to make a few comments. It's interesting because Hazel sent me a book and wanted to appear on Macro Pro and Friends and, you know, some of our conferences. And I don't know, I just never could make that happen. I just felt a little uneasy about it. So I didn't do that. So it is interesting how they work when they're fraudulent. They work as many angles as they can to get their message out there. Yeah. The other thing is I did go in to see how many times I could find myself on the pin eyes. And so it said 30 times. They could find me at least 30 times. So if they could find me, they could find anyone.
See? It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Pretty fun little tool.
It was very fun. Wendy, would you like to say anything before we close out?
Well, Dalene, thank you so much for joining us today, and I certainly appreciate your presentation. It was a really good presentation. I really enjoyed some of the stories that you shared with us and some of the information. And I want to wish everybody a happy holiday season. I know that weather's kind of crazy, and you know, we get out there when we have little breaks in this rain. So go ahead and do that. Remember to take care of yourselves, and have a nice holiday season.
Indeed. Yes.
Right, well,
Happy holidays.
I think this, yeah, absolutely. I think this is your last time co-hosting with me this season, so thank you very much for doing that, Wendy. We also, I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow we have case handling. It's a whole overview on your cases and all, different ways to handle it with James Rossi's law firm. He and Elizabeth is going to be speaking. So please make sure that you register for that and all of the other classes we have available, including the one that James and I are going to do as the very last webinar of the holiday season. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the next Macro Pro and Friends. Again, Dalene, thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you so much. Privileged to be here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.